It is the start of July, and for that we've got some new music. Nice. Can you tell me? I don't know if you've watched the show or not, because maybe we haven't talked about this. Do you know what show that music reminds you of, or reminds me of?
Oh man, Ozark?
No, old school. Like when I was in college, this was the show that
The Sopranos?
No, that's closer though. Entourage.
Yeah. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. An Entourage guy? I never got into either one of those. I mean, I was more of a traditional cable / sports guy.
So was I. Entourage was the one show that I watched every episode of when it was, the day it came out, and I loved it. I think you would enjoy it. I really do. They're short episodes too. That was the thing. They were like 30 minutes. It was the easiest thing in the world. You could fly through the whole seasons in a day.
That's what made The Office so popular, right? Was those 22-minute shows.
So I don't get to talk to you about my favorite Entourage characters, but that's probably for the best, because we've got some fun things to talk about. We're going to do an NFC East preview. Last podcast we talked all about Cam, so we don't have to do that again. NFC East is going to be really interesting. We're going to talk about that. Quibi shows are going to be at the end of the episode, so you'll want to stick around. And I have been told, you gave me a little teaser here, that we have breaking news we need to discuss. So we'll lead with that.
Our friend of the program, actually, he was the guest last week, Matthew Collar, sent me this DM. It was a tweet by the Behavior Movement.
Okay. I'm already excited.
Love seeing our exclusive player behavior analytics being cited by official team sites. So our Ravens wrote, Willie Snead, a sure-handed possession receiver and strong blocker in the run game, caught a high 5 touchdowns last season.
True. Good.
He was the 10th most valuable wide receiver in the league in 2019.
Wait, what?
According to analytics used by Pro Football Network's Lucas Ellinis.
Dude, what?
Dude,
Get out of here, man. Are you kidding me?
Look, and we generally shy away from ripping on other people who are trying to do the things that we're doing, because obviously, frankly, everybody, there's not anybody I interact with that I don't like in the space, really. But the face validity in this is just egregious.
Here's I think a good litmus test for this. If you had every player on the Ravens,
Willie Snead's not the 10th most valuable.
If you had every player on the Ravens go, hey, tell me your 10th most valuable receivers in the NFL, I would say you might get a few that would maybe put Hollywood Brown in there, just to be like, I love my team.
Right.
Not a single one is putting Willie Snead in there. Have you looked up his WAR rank yet? Because I have it.
Willie Snead last season was worth 6/100ths of a win in 750 snaps, which is actually down a little bit. Snead actually had some seasons where he had some meaty wars, but this last year, not so much. Let me look at the ranking. Where was that ranked?
I have it for you right here. Out of all receivers last year, he is behind the likes of Richie James Jr., Josh Gordon, Deshaun Jackson, Laquan Treadwell even. He was 101st.
Deshaun Jackson in the one game against Washington on opening day accounted for more win shares than Willie Snead did the entire season. So I think that this is and again, we don't want to get into.
Yeah, I'm not trying to bag on the guy. It's how do you think you arrive at this answer? Would be my question.
I think you arrive at the answer by a priori, and we know people in the space to do this. A priori assigning value to the Ravens running game. That's probably you know, when somebody will say, look, the run game is valuable in the NFL. I don't care what the hashtag numbers say. And so then they say, okay, the Ravens added this much value in the run game, irrespective of like whether or not the, you know, who did it, right? And then like, you know, and then there must be some sort of charting here on how good of a blocker he is. And then, you know, assigning him like an outsized amount of, let's say, long runs where he contributed a big block or something. Yeah. Because, you know, even if you just look at his numbers, I mean, he had, who put it in our chat here, he had 31 catches on 46 targets. So, and the 5 touchdowns are nice, right? The 5 touchdowns are nice.
It's career high.
Career high, yeah, as it said there. But
let me read you the list that we have, our 10 highest here. Chris Godwin, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Tyler Lockett, Tyreek Hill, Terry McLaurin, Devontae Parker, Cortland Sutton, Mike Evans. Pretty good group from last year. They were pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, and it says, so something that's interesting here, as somebody in our chat pointed out, it's due to plus yak, you know, like, so I think what this metric tries to do is divorce things where there's more. So the really hard thing that they're trying to do is sort of untangle everything. But what that leaves you doing is not assigning credit for things that are done by multiple people, which is absurd, right? So like, that's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, Willie Snead.
Well, the run game is the perfect example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Willie Snead gets a catch and he gets like a 30 yards after the catch. Sure, he contributed to that. Now, I'm going to dispute the fact that he contributed all of it, because obviously pass accuracy and stuff contribute to yards after the catch. But the pass was the valuable thing too. And just because there were more than one person responsible for the pass getting off and being complete doesn't mean that the value is zero on it. You know, like, I don't know. That to me seems like what the, you know, a relatively absurd thing. But
I'm not. Before we move on, not trying to be rude. I just find that hilarious, and I like Willie Snead too. I've had him. I've been a proud owner of Willie Snead on many a fantasy team, and have cheered for him many times.
I don't think Willie Snead believes he's the 10th most valuable receiver in the NFL. So.
He does not. He certainly does not. This is like Drew Lock top 5 quarterback material. All right, let's go to the NFC East. I'm pretty excited to talk about this, and I have a bunch of questions for you. But the first one that I wanted to start off with is, it's very clear that there are 2 good teams and there are 2 teams that are not so good. And I think both of them are kind of in competition with one another. How big is the gap? And I want to ask you this before looking at the results of our simulation. How big would you have said the gap is between Dallas and Philadelphia?
On first blush, I thought it was closer. I think, yeah. I mean, I tweeted this out the other day. I think Doug Peterson's a good coach, especially at basic strategy, but he does leave a lot to be desired in terms of play calling, you know, but I always thought that he maybe had an advantage over Mike McCarthy. I don't know if I think that's true anymore.
Yeah, I don't. It was interesting because I still am a huge fan of what Philadelphia did in the draft. Obviously, Dallas did some nice things in the draft. Okay, great. You know, we probably tend to overvalue what rookies are going to do in their rookie year. And then you look at what they have other than that. And what Dallas had is a really explosive offense that got really unlucky last year. And what Philadelphia had was a not so explosive offense that managed to squeeze by that unlucky team last year. And if there's one of those things that I expect to continue going forward, it would be that Dallas's offense is really good this year. Philadelphia's offense, okay, they lost Brandon Brooks. They have questions at left tackle. They have questions at wide receiver, certainly. I guess they have some questions at tight end. They certainly have questions still on the defensive side of the ball in coverage. Like, there are a lot of questions in Philadelphia before you even get to Doug Peterson, and I think the questions that you bring up with Doug Peterson are really valid. everyone gave him a ton of credit for going for 4th and shorts a couple of years ago. And other than that, there are a lot of things that are a little bit flawed in the way that he calls games. In particular, leveraging the run a ton on early down, long yardage situations where it's not advantageous. So I can start to get to where our simulation came out, which is actually the difference between these two teams is pretty big. Like let me ask you this. If you were just ranking offenses based on potential, Kansas City's 1. Who's 2?
Well, Baltimore, because they have the MVP playing quarterback. But Dallas is in the top 5.
Are they 3?
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, first, yeah, they're San Francisco.
Really? So I would say New Orleans.
Yeah.
San Francisco to me, though.
Tennessee is another one where, I mean, you literally are bringing back the guy who led the league in like almost every major passing category. You have A.J. Brown, who had less than 100 targets last year. You have Corey Davis as a top 5 pick, and an offensive line that's really good. And you know, for what it's worth, Derrick Henry at running back. But to your point, Dallas is a top 5 offense in the NFL.
And I don't think it's –
and Philadelphia is not, categorically not.
Like I would say, so Dallas, you think about it. Okay, Dak Prescott, top 10 quarterback. Cooper, Gallup, Lamb. I mean, that's easy top 5 potential in terms of wide receivers. Tight ends. I mean, you know, tight end is a position that you can scheme. Blake Jarwin's fine, whatever. Offensive line, top 5 as well. Dak Prescott has both of those things to work with. In terms of wide receiving core and offensive line, he could have a top 5 year too, and he was top 5 in terms of wins above replacement, top 10 in terms of grade. So you might have quarterback, receiver, and offensive line, and I noticed I didn't bring up the run game, but like, okay, they're fine there too. And all of those are top 5.
Yep. Yeah, and last season they had defensive regression, but when you look at, you know, the Xavier Woods is a pretty good safety. I think he's still there. Byron Jones is gone, but Chidobe Awuzie is still there. You know, obviously they got Trayvon Diggs, who's a pretty good draft pick, a guy that we would have taken a lot higher than where he went. The 2 linebackers, Van Der Esch and Smith, you know, they could get better. You know, they're not going to go any worse than they were a season ago. And they have DeMarcus Lawrence. And, you know, to their credit, like, you know, look at the pass rushers. You know, they got Aldon Smith, right, a former 49er who changed the complexion of that defense under Vic Fangio, like 7, 8 years ago. And, you know, he's coming back. I believe they still have Randy Gregory, who, again, is sort of a similar athletic, but a lot of personal baggage. And, you know, but you get after the passer there. I look at Philadelphia, and I'm going through, and we do this every single time. It doesn't always come up on the show, but I looked at the most valuable players on the team this season ago. You had Wentz, which is a hair shy of 2 wins above replacement. Malcolm Jenkins was their 2nd most valuable player. He's playing in New Orleans now. Brandon Brooks was their 3rd most valuable player, a guard who got injured and is not playing this season. Rodney McLeod's a safety, and again, like those positions sort of like, you know, wax and wane. And you have Ertz and Kelce, but again, Ertz like had a serious injury last year that like is not like a football injury. It's a lacerated spleen or whatever that ended up being. And so there's a ton of question marks here. I still don't think I like Rager as a draft pick, and I like Wallace as a draft and I like Hightower as a draft pick at wide receiver. But like they're going to get what, a month to work with Carson Wentz, and you know, and I think people don't look at the schedule as much. I mean, and I don't think we harped on it necessarily as much as we should have over the course of the last few weeks. But, you know, it's not like they have an easy schedule outside of getting to face the Giants and the Washington Redskins a few times.
Yeah. Okay. So let me read the Vegas win totals. The Vegas odds to win the division. Dallas even money plus 100, Philly plus 125, the Giants plus 1100, and the Washington Redskins are plus 1200, 12-1 to win the division. The win totals: Dallas at 9.5. The over is minus 155.
Huge.
Wow. Philly is 9.5 as well. The over is minus 110. The under is minus 120. By the way, Dallas is under plus 125. The Giants at 6.5 and the Washington Redskins at 5.5.
Yep.
our simulation results have Dallas as a 48% chance to win the division, Philadelphia at a 22% chance to win the division. And that is the massive distance between where the market has it and where we have it.
Yeah.
Plus 125 is what, like 46% implied odds? What is that? I'm trying to do this off the top of my head.
It's I mean, there's a little bit of an edge on Dallas there if you can get the plus 125, right?
And
Dallas is even money. So
Dallas
there's no
even
edge
money.
there.
So there's no edge there.
I mean,
the edge is really on Washington and the Giants, who we have with a 17% and a 13% chance to win it. And so I have a couple of thoughts here with regard to Philadelphia. The first one is that when I look at this division, if you take out Washington and New York for a second, which I don't want to do, but if you do, Jalen Reagor, I think, is the most important player in terms of he could be all over the spectrum, and whether he is really good right off the bat or really bad right off the bat could go a long way to determining this division, because that's where Philly was terrible. Like when Deshaun Jackson went out and couldn't run downfield, they had a tight end in Alshon Jeffrey basically at this point in his career as their most explosive wide receiver. Like that's not going to get it done. If Jalen Reagor can get downfield, yeah, and I loved Alshon Jeffrey. This is not like he's way in the twilight, like at the end of his career in terms of being an explosive guy downfield. That's not going to happen. If Jalen Reagor can be that guy, though, and he was one of, if not the most, I think it was he and Henry Ruggs, right? The highest athleticism scores that we gave any wide receivers. That could be massive for Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but that to me, if that's the guy things are hinging on, then a 22% chance makes a lot more sense than a 46% chance.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think is creeping into this as well is, Daniel Jones wasn't atrocious last year. He wasn't great, but he certainly wasn't as bad as I think a lot of people thought he was going to be. But Dwayne Haskins played really well last year at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. You don't want to Sam Darnold this, right? Because Darnold had a similar stretch at the end of 2018. But you look at Washington and I hate to give them too much credit, but at this time last year, you had the Alex Smith injury, you had horrible cap situation, right? And now before our very eyes, you look at the cap situations in the NFL right now, and they have one of the best. In just a season, right? They sort of turned it around in terms of getting young players in the stable, right? They got Landon Collins in there as a veteran. They got a defensive front, Chase Young, but you also have Montez Sweat. Yeah, you have a bunch of players on the front seven who are young and good. And then on the offensive line, they're shaky a little, they're a little bit shaky, but at the receiving position, McLaurin was the most valuable rookie in the NFL last year. Obviously you mix and match that with some, I still, there's the cover.
Terry McLaurin was the most valuable wide receiver in this division.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you add to that, I know Jack Del Rio got a lot of flack last week, but he's a plus defensive coordinator. You have Ron Rivera, who's a good head coach. And I think most importantly, they're replacing guys who are not that's the same thing with, Dallas with McCarthy. It's not only the question of McCarthy, it's McCarthy over the coach he's replacing. And I think that there's a similar argument you can be made, for Ron Rivera. So I'm not saying they're great, but I am saying that they are the win total to bet over here.
That's my favorite bet in this entire division is over 5.5 for the Redskins.
And they're 2 years removed from Alex Smith having them at 6-3 when he broke his leg. Mm-hmm. The weird stuff happens, man. But I look at the Eagles here, and you look at their schedule. They open against Washington on the road, right? Second straight year they open with Washington. Washington had them down 17-0. On the road when they have Rams at home. That still could be a tough out because we don't know. I'm down on the Rams, but they're still a team. They have our Bengals week 3, but then it looks Niners on the road, Steelers on the road, Ravens at home. Then they get the Giants team that's probably not very good 2 times in the next 3 weeks. They have Dallas sandwiched in between, and then they go Browns on the road. Browns are by then might be feeling their own oats. They're with having the easiest schedule in the NFL, probably a good record at that point. Seahawks, at Packers, home to Saints, and then finishing up with Dallas in their one of last week. Like, this is not an easy schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles. If they mess around and, this has been a long-standing, I think our friend Sunset Shaz on Twitter was pointing out, like, the Eagles are like statistically bad at preventing injuries.
Mhm.
So if they have another situation where they're starting AAF players at wide receiver, like, it's going to go pear-shaped for them pretty quickly.
They my second favorite bet in this division is Philly under 9.5.
Yeah.
And actually, this is so weird because I really like this Philadelphia Eagles team, but to me there are so many things that are potentially damning for their season. So the Carson Wentz thing, he just continually is a player that every time he drops back, I feel like after 2.5 seconds, you're worried. And that just, that's not something that I want to be like, oh, this team's going to win 10 games, because you feel like he's going to miss a couple of games. Jalen Reagor, even if he is ultimately good, is probably going to take him a little while.
And as much as we like Jalen Hurts, like, that's not a –
yeah, you're not going to throw him in there and go 10-6.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Well,
so I don't know. It's very interesting to me. If Philadelphia goes 9-7 this year, do you think we view them as having had a successful season?
No. Because I would say, if you ask any Eagles fan, how have they viewed the last two seasons? I think most of them would say, okay, 2018 was fun and plucky with Nick Foles, and they won a playoff game, blah, 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 right? But they went 9-7. Last season was a disaster. Last season, they know that Dallas shit the bed, and that's why they ended up winning the division. I don't think I don't think any Philadelphia fan looks at the last two seasons and says, yeah, this is the ideal situation for our favorite team. They decline there. You got to wonder. I mean, I just have a really hard time seeing how they acclimate all these people. Plus, some of their horses are getting older. Fletcher Cox is getting older. Brandon Graham's getting older. They already got rid of Malcolm Jenkins. I know the Jatavis Brown signing was fairly good at linebacker. They've always sort of struggled there. And Nickel Roby-Coleman is a good player and will help them. But it's not like they got, not that they got a whole lot better. I mean, Wallace, the draft pick they got from Clemson's a decent prospect. But again, he's got a month to acclimate to the NFL.
It's so I had two things that were interesting. The first is, I'll just point this out. So we have Philadelphia's win total at 7.5. Vegas has it at 9.5. That is a massive disparity. We have them going over 9.5 less than 20% of the time. But this shines a light on something that's really interesting, because I think people that are Eagles fans might be listening to this going, fuck you guys. I have been a huge proponent of Philadelphia for quite some time, in large part because they get it from a team building standpoint. This tells you how much luck there is in the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys prioritized signing a running back and a defensive end over their quarterback and their best wide receiver, and have a way more talent-laden offense than the Philadelphia Eagles, who made a really shrewd signing of Carson Wentz, got him at a pretty good deal, have drafted shrewdly, have traded back. And it just goes to show you, man, you can do make a ton of really smart moves. Football is such a small sample size thing, relies so heavily on the quarterback, that you can still end up well behind teams that make moves that, they just kind of luck into. And the Cowboys have largely done that. I mean, they did that in the draft, certainly. Let's talk a little bit about Washington and the Giants. Yep. So you mentioned the Redskins, and you brought up a lot of the points that I was thinking of as well. Terry McLaurin, as I said, the most valuable receiver. People would say it's Amari Cooper every single time. Terry McLaurin, who can name the second receiver on the Washington Redskins?
It'd be
no one.
Yeah.
I'm in Washington, D.C. right now. I could go ask every person I see on the street. They couldn't name him. Now, that says a lot about Washington, D.C. as well. But Terry McLaurin is a stud. Okay, so Terry McLaurin, most valuable wide receiver in the entire division. They have Dwayne Haskins, who, as you mentioned, he had a really down and then up season. But do you remember how he came into the league? the Washington Redskins were a disaster at that point, right? Like they couldn't make a decision. It was Jay Gruden's going to be out. They couldn't make a decision of who was going to play. It was like Dwayne Haskins is not ready. Then he's coming in the middle of a game and looking completely lost. But towards the end of the season, he did perform a lot better. He and McLaurin kind of got on the same page. He was the 17th highest graded quarterback from a clean pocket. That's many spots ahead of Daniel Jones. Chase Young should be a guy that comes in and as a rookie, like he's not the guy I would have taken at number 2, but as a rookie, he should immediately, provide value there. And then they've done some things in trying to strengthen their secondary where they might not be a sieve in the secondary either. And that's a recipe for being a decent team.
I mean, the big point here is that when you look at this division, so I updated our strength of schedule to factor in home field. So like it used to just be what were the team's ELOs, but I kind of was like, well, it's probably a good catch to get a good team at home and a bad team on the, all this.
Yep.
The Giants have the 8th most difficult strength of schedule this year. The Eagles are at 11. Dallas, 31. And Washington's at 20th. So when you look at the difference between the Giants and Washington, that game in week 16 when they battled it out, win in overtime, and the Giants won in Washington, really screws the Giants, right?
That's such a good point. I remember us watching that game and being like, one of these dumb teams is going to win.
And both guys played well. I mean, I think Haskins got hurt, and then Keenum had to start the Week 17 game. But Haskins was playing great. I mean, there's so much here when you look at Washington as a buy low because, for one, the owner drafted Haskins, and Gruden flat out didn't want to play him, right? That's something that I don't think you can underscore.
They were a disaster, an absolute fucking disaster.
Right, and Alex Smith was supposed to be the quarterback. His contract is still on the books. It's huge, and that was and then they had Case Keenum. Obviously, they had Colt McCoy. Didn't Gruden start McCoy
yes
in a mid and McCoy was just dreadful against they got shut out I think by the Patriots and and it was so egregious how how much they wanted to suppress him. And then when they finally got we're like, okay, well, this is going to be a thing where we're going to actually play this young guy and we're going to give him a shot. They were competitive on the road against Green Bay. They covered the spread in that game. Green Bay is a 13-3 team. I'm trying to remember all their games.
Stop it.
They
13-3 team.
They were competitive in both Eagles games, right?
Yep.
They had them on the road. The Eagles were down. The Eagles were down double digits.
I think it was 17-0. They came back and won.
Yeah, I mean, and in the second half of the year where the Eagles really needed to win out, Washington had them on the ropes, and then eventually I think the Eagles covered on some stupid fumble at the end of the game. But it's good. I think that there's a chance here, and it really does underscore okay, they stayed back. It's really what the Dolphins did with Tua this year. They waited until their natural pick and then took a quarterback. Washington did that as well. And then they made it have to trade the McLaurin pick, right, for Haskins, because they didn't have to move up. I think it's bright there for them. And having a coach, and I understand the ownership is one thing, but having a coach that's competent and not on his way out, I think will really help. And the fact that I got their win total just now at 5 flat. I'm sorry.
5?
I'm sorry. That's the best. I think that's the best bet we've talked about the entire offseason.
At 5? Yes.
5
they
flat.
go over 5.5 78% of the time.
Yeah, I mean, and I know obviously there might be there are always things that could be, but anytime you have something that big, I mean, it's just okay, well, I at least have to sort of think about that opinion seriously. And so I don't know, man. I look at their schedule and
by the way, sorry about the sirens.
It's okay. We know that you live in was a war zone over there? Yeah. But no, and so I'm bullish there. I think they got a shot to be fairly good. And 5 is, 5's nothing.
I think Terry McLaurin, I want to say second or third, maybe highest graded rookie that we've ever had at the wide receiver position. He was legitimately very, very good on a team that had – it wasn't as if he came in Juju Smith-Schuster style, not knocking Juju Smith-Schuster, but with Antonio Brown at the number one wide receiver position. He came in on a team with it was just an awful team, and he was immediately a stud. And
when you look at, just to finish this up really briefly, Antonio Gibson's a good draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
Antonio Gandy Golden at wide receiver is a pretty damn good draft pick as well, where they got him. They're developing players around. They're getting players to develop around. And again, we can't speak out of one side of our mouth at the Eagles and say, oh, the rookies don't matter in 2020, and then they do for Washington. But I think the bar is so much lower, right? If Washington rips off 3 or 4 games in November, that's more likely because the rookies than Philadelphia having to win 10 or more games.
That's the whole point. There's a difference in trying to get over 5 wins and trying to get over 10 wins, right? That's a massive difference. And Chase Young, look, he's not the pick you would make to win a Super Bowl. But we talk about this all the time, right? Like those guys can come in and make an immediate impact. He's not going to end up being as valuable as a quarterback in that position. But we're talking just about this year. Let's talk about the Giants a little bit. I want to start with this. Gut reaction. I say you can have Daniel Jones or Dwayne Haskins going forward. Who do you take?
Haskins.
Okay. So that was my answer too. I think it is close, but here was how I made the decision. Dwayne Haskins, as I mentioned, 17th highest graded quarterback from a clean pocket. Daniel Jones, 27th last year. Daniel Jones, just, like above 5% turnover worthy play rate. Those are things that, man, I know Dwayne Haskins looked really bad in those first couple of games, but I need a quarterback to be above average from a clean pocket. I have to have it. And they were drafted 4 spots, apart. But if you had run that draft back and the Giants hadn't had that pick, Daniel Jones could have been 15, 20 around later than Dwayne Haskins. So the prior there, I don't think should weigh that heavily. And just because Daniel Jones had a couple of, kind of crazy games or games that looked really good in the box score, is not reason to take him over Dwayne Haskins. I would take Dwayne Haskins. And it was close, but it was definitive in my mind.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm just, I sort of think about you want to fade the most recent narrative, right? So the most recent narrative is that Daniel Jones had a really good rookie year by most. And so that's probably baked into this number. And even if he's like fundamentally the same as Haskins, I would still go with Haskins just because of what we saw with Mayfield last year, right? Like you new head coach, and I know the new head coach is also on Haskins' side, but Haskins' old coach was like sabotaging him, right? Like, so there's a new head coach, and there's Jason Garrett, who, he did develop a Dak Prescott, but at the same time, like, who knows if that's, I think the perception of Garrett is negative. So I just fade the recency bias, which is that Daniel Jones is great and Dwayne Haskins is kind of a bum last year, and I'm gonna like ignore that to the moon, I guess.
So here's some, looking at Daniel Jones, one of the things that stuck out to me, and, I watched a decent amount of those games. Like I tried to rewatch them because it was a hot button topic, right? And especially on Sunday Night Football, where there are a lot of Giants fans, including our good friend, Fred Godelli, the executive producer of Sunday Night Football. So I always wanted to be ready.
Friend of the show.
I always wanted to be ready with why Daniel Jones might not have been as great, just, if there was that angle. And I kept noticing his accuracy was really far from pinpoint, and our charting would back that up. He was well below in terms of accurate throw rate at every depth of the field. And that's important to take into account because depth matters. I think he had the 3rd highest rate of what we call catchable but inaccurate throws. You hear that. What do you think to yourself? Is that like, oh, thank God, at least he's not, putting the ball in an uncatchable area? Or are you like, I'm not really sold on that, going in the other direction and being better the next year?
I would say if you look, I mean, I know Golden Tate was suspended for part of the year, but you look at that team, they got really good play out of Slayton. They got really good play. Well, they have Shepard, Slayton, Engram, Tate. And that's probably helping those passes become complete. more than not. And if anything, as we see, if anything like the Eagles happened a season ago where their receivers get hurt or regress, it's going to hit Jones like a ton of bricks.
That was one of the reasons why I thought investing in receiver would have been so important for them in the draft, because to me, there's this built-in, oh, you know what? It wasn't a great year for Daniel Jones, but he didn't have a receiver that could get open. And then you're going to be stuck in this Mitch Trubisky land, which I know people hate that because Mitch Trubisky is now like, the worst thing you can call someone. But just a couple of years ago, it was, how dare you call Mitch Trubisky not a top, 15 quarterback? He's fantastic. Now he can't beat out Nick Foles. So, I want to remind people that that's a possibility. And they, just like you shouldn't be asking for apologies. Like, remember Pat Shurmur asked for an apology after the first game he started? How ridiculous can you – like, that's absurd.
How on tilt were you when the Tampa Bay Bucks lost that game because of a stupid missed field goal because Bruce Arians took a delay of game?
That's right.
We weren't going to get Bucks over 6.5.
That's right.
That was a roller coaster.
Any other bets for this division that you have made or want to make?
No, I always get a little concerned where we're that much off market for sure, know. But it doesn't take a lot for me to want to reason a team over 5, especially when there isn't a big tank on the horizon. There's no incentive for the Washington Redskins to tank this year. If they're going to lose 5 or they're going to, lose 11 or more games, they're going to earn it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And like when it comes to teams like Jacksonville or Carolina or something like that, like there's a considerable reason to be like, well, there's, maybe they're tanking. Like Washington has no incentive to do this. So
no, I'm with you.
I think that to me is like my favorite bet so far, and not one that it's just one the other one that I might want to look at, and I got to find a market for this. Maybe it's on Bet Online, but if you can find a market where Washington wins more games than the Giants, that's probably going to be a plus price bet. And that's one that I would make.
Yeah, I like those. First one I ever did was Raiders and Niners. I was like,
let's look actually
5 years ago. While you're looking for that, the Washington one is my favorite. The way that I would fade Philadelphia, actually, I think you can look at those teams like the Giants and the Redskins and say, okay, I'm not as confident in Philadelphia. I'm not going to bet on the Cowboys in this case. I might bet on the Redskins and the Giants in a win total, in terms of a win total, because they're going to get to play Philadelphia a couple of times. And if they're a little weaker than we suspect, that's going to help those teams out a little bit. And they have such low win totals. Whereas, the Cowboys, man, everyone thinks they're just going to go 10-6, 11-5.
Yep.
And that's, as we saw last year, like not an easy thing to do.
Long term, you're gonna struggle if you continue to bet teams like Dallas and Tampa Bay over in seasons like this. And I know it's enticing, and I know that there's one of those two teams is gonna win, but long term, it's just kind of a sucker play because there's so many things that can go wrong. Did you find your market? No, but I did find one that I kind of like, and this is a rivalry as we talked about. Panthers versus Redskins. A lot of people in the Carolinas are Redskins fans because the Panthers didn't show up till 1995, and we saw it last year when they played in Carolina that there were mostly Redskins fans there. Redskins win total plus 105 to win more games than the Panthers. I kind of like that.
Wow, yeah, I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
send that my way. All right, are you ready for some Quibi?
I am. Oh, dude, I'm so excited right now.
All right. So if you're new to the show, Quibi has done a great job of flattening the curve for all of us by no one's contracting the Quibi virus, despite the fact that they're giving it away for free. And yet they poured in was like $2 billion or whatever. And so they've come up with a ton of shows. Almost all of them have stars in them, and almost all of them are ridiculous. So I pick Quibi show, and then I write my own show description, and Eric tries to guess which one is actually being made on television and has money being poured into it. So, first show. Want to be a superstar? Live large, big house, nice cars. In 2020, being a rock superstar means you drop hits on TikTok. Follow Charlie D'Amelio, Addison Rae, and Zach King as they run the Gen Z world one 15-second dance video at a time in TikTok and Roll. New episodes are streaming weekly. That's show number one.
Okay.
Show number two. Jan and Cricket think they have what it takes to become TV's newest house-flipping couple. Unfortunately, a Mexican drug cartel thinks so too. Now the delusional duo has to survive their newest project, renovating the cartel's mansions. Will Forte stars in Flipped. All episodes streaming now.
I think it's the TikTok and Roll one that's made. Oh, no, the TikTok and Roll one is real.
No. That would actually do well. I have come up with multiple good shows. Last week, it was what did I have last week? Oh, it was fantastic.
I always go against the one that I always go. It's like, you know, when you're like on a cold streak, you always bet against the thing that you think. I always take the one that I think is actually real and bet and take the other one because you're actually really good at creating these.
Last week I was following an Instagram fitness model and having them like help people get 6-pack abs, and I think that has legs. I don't know about Flipped. I think Will Forte is funny, but man, I'm not watching that show. I'm probably also not watching TikTok and Roll, but I can tell you a lot of people would.
I will never until the end. I will never understand HGTV.
HGTV. What
like
do they
the
do
whole
there?
like watching people buy a house thing.
Oh.
I'll never get. I'll never understand that.
Me
Or
neither.
flip a house or anything. Like I don't know. Maybe it's a new sucker born every day. I don't know.
So far, I've come up with Captain Crunch. That was last week's show.
Yeah.
And
I got
TikTok.
that one right though.
Yeah, you did. All right, this was fun. We will be back on Monday. We've got some fun stuff. We're going to plan out some interviews for the rest of the off season, and do some fun stuff over this weekend to make sure that the episodes are good. Everyone be safe. Don't do anything stupid on July 4th. Wear a freaking mask. And, yeah, we'll see you guys on Monday. Peace out.